Okay, so I have bursitis in my shoulder.
Okay, what does that feel like?
Well, so a bursa is this, this sounds so sexy, a sac of fluid that is at pretty much every joint in your body. So your shoulder, your elbow, your knee, you can get bursitis, your hip, you can get bursitis in any of these places.
Okay.
And bursitis is when this sac of fluid gets inflamed. And it's usually something you do, and I have no idea what I did.
Okay.
I have no idea what I did. But hurt like a mamma jamma. I mean, it just, like, I couldn't move my arm behind me. So, like, putting a belt on was like a form of torture.
Wow.
And so I made the mistake. Okay, I should have just gone to the doctor.
Sure, that's
should have just gone to the doctor.
Do.
Well, but it felt like I just slept on my arm wrong. So I thought, okay, this will work itself out. But after like 3 days, I was like, okay, this is not getting any better.
So did you go to the doctor?
I did go to the doctor, but before I did that, I made the mistake of going on Facebook and saying, hey, guys, so I said, my left arm kind of hurts. And everyone was like, you're having a heart attack. Call 911. But they didn't tell me to call 911, but they're like, oh my God, it's your left arm.
Yeah.
Oh, please, people. No. So yeah.
Don't let Facebook be your doctor.
No, that bad. I mean, I was just looking for home remedies like ice or heat. Like, what should I do in the meantime? Like, I was going to go to the doctor the next day, but I was like, just so I could make it to the next 24 hours. And everyone's like, go to the hospital now. You could be having a heart attack. So, okay. So just the thing that my doctor told me, if the pain is localized and repeatable, it's not a heart attack and you don't need to flip the fuck out. And so yeah.
Excellent.
So anyway, bursitis. This is the part of the show that our friend Faye would call the organ recital. This is where people who are getting older just go over all of their medical issues every time they meet each other. So that's mine. Bursitis of the shoulder. Not fun. Don't recommend it. 0 stars.
When the chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt, you really need relief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a Poperation. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
This is Poperation. I am Eric.
I'm Stacey.
And I feel like I should have just introduced myself in a British accent.
I've decided I'm going to talk like this the whole time.
Oh, we really? Can we?
I think we should.
I'll be... it's funny. I automatically try to go into Scottish. So I lived in Scotland for 2 years.
That's
I don't know if you knew this.
I did.
So it's great. It's magic. It's brilliant. I love it. That's the way I use it.
I've been watching Loch Ness. Have you watched that at all?
I have not. I've not done
lovely.
that. Okay, that's really annoying, and we're
and we're going to keep doing it the whole time.
No, we're
going
not.
From
we're
one
not.
kind to another all the time. Move your blooming arse.
No, we're not. I'm just going to make a command decision there. That is not happening. But
that's a hint as to what we're talking about
today. We are getting up into all of our Anglophile stuff today because you and I both have a great fondness for all things British.
We do.
And oftentimes we kind of wondered, like, why is that? I mean, are the Brits, do they really do entertainment that much better?
No.
Than Americans
I don't
do?
think better is not the right word. I think it is about different.
Okay. But
I was thinking, so why do we still like them though? Because we did leave. Hashtag Merca. We did leave. But I think that we still kind of feel colonial. We feel like we're still kind of their colonists.
A little bit.
We have the same language. Of course, we have that history way back. And, it's just a lot of immigrants from there to here. So we have lots of ancestry. I have peeps over in Europe. I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of Brit peeps. But, there is a connection there.
I don't know who my peeps are.
And in every war... aside from the one where we fought them, we've been allies. The world wars, we're allies with them. They're one of, have been historically one of our besties. So, but I think that, I don't think they're better. I don't think they're in it more, no.
But here's an interesting little piece. So there was this study done a while back, commissioned by both the University of Chicago and Tel Aviv University did this study.
Okay, so it feels kind of random right now.
Well, what they did is they brought people into a lab kind of a thing where they put headphones on everyone's heads. and they had them listen to a dozen or so different statements read by a dozen or so different voices. And they had to ask people after each statement, did the statement sound credible to you? And what they found was that accent was the number one indicator of credibility. Now, the number one accent that is credible to you is the one that sounds like yours.
Oh, okay.
So if you hear your own, that feels trustworthy because it feels like home.
Right.
But number two, all over the English-speaking world, from the U.S. to Canada to the UK to Israel to Australia to New Zealand, was this classic moneyed British accent.
Posh.
Yeah, and it sounds sophisticated and credible and knowledgeable and intelligent to everybody.
Oh my God, think about it. If James Earl Jones or Morgan Fairchild did a British accent.
I think you meant Morgan Freeman, not Morgan Fairchild. Nothing against... I mean, nothing against Morgan Fairchild.
Let's think about it. Let's think about Morgan Fairchild for just a minute.
Hey, I follow Morgan Fairchild on Twitter. She's a great Twitter follow.
So we should totally tag her for this show.
I don't know. Let's think about Morgan Fairchild with a British accent. Why not? Why not, Stacey?
She would have had a different career altogether.
That's an odd Freudian slip you just made. I don't know what that is. Okay.
But I did mean Morgan Freeman. I was excited about Morgan Freeman with a British accent.
Yeah,
and
well,
James Earl Jones
I tell you, what it sounds like? Idris Elba. Because Idris Elba has that amazing,
there you go,
deep register kind of voice, and he does have a British accent.
He does have a British accent.
When he is not playing an American.
And he's pretty.
He's very pretty.
That has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about right now. But
I tell you what, when we like the Brits, we also like pretty. And when the two things come in the same combo.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little warm in the studio right now.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So those are some of the reasons why Anglophiles might... Yes, it does.
And I guess sophisticated can go along with credible. You know, you said that in that scientific study.
Yeah, because, it's intelligence. It sounds intelligent. It sounds, worldly.
We want to trust the person
in what
who
they
talks
say.
like that because they sound like they know what they're talking about.
So car commercials work that way, right? I mean, if you're gonna sell a Honda... the Jaguar, right? Or if you're going to sell a Honda Accord, then you find a voiceover artist that sounds like me. If you're going to sell it in America, you're selling an Infiniti. Suddenly it's Jon Snow behind the wheel of that car and some British person telling you what your financial options are.
Exactly.
And here, take all of my money for this car that costs 3 times as much because a British person told me maybe I should buy it.
And I want to be cool like the British person.
Yeah. And you want to be Jon Snow.
It'll make me classy.
Winter is coming and you want to drive the Infiniti through the snowstorm. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, all of that is true. Now, when we think about the British invasion, we're typically thinking about the first kind of thing that happened was the Beatles, right?
The first kind of thing happened was the revolution, but I know what you're talking about.
In the pop culture realm. There was a British invasion when I went to high school. Duran Duran, the Eurythmics.
That wasn't the first one. That was not the first one. Pop culture.
So when I was in high school, I was impacted by a lot of this too. Music especially that came from the UK.
But the first music British invasion was the Beatles. It was the Rolling Stones.
Yep.
It was Herman's Hermits. It was all of that going on, which we're going to talk about later. But yes, there was a second one in the 80s, which was Duran Duran and
Culture Club.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then there was one a little bit more recently, Adele.
Yeah.
One Direction. Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
But also, it's like if you look at books, what put kids back to reading again?
Oh, Harry Potter.
The libraries, I mean, already, the internet was coming up in the 90s, and libraries weren't used very much as they were, rather, I should say. And suddenly, kids were reading again.
Oh, they staying up until midnight on the days that the new Harry Potter were
around.
released.
I mean, Barnes and Noble, had stores that were making money.
And their costumes, they would show up in their Harry Potter costumes to buy this tome that was like, towards the end, they were 700 pages long, and they would read them they'd stay up all night.
Yes.
And read Harry Potter.
And they were addicted. Kids were reading again. That was a huge thing. And that was Harry Potter, and that was J.K. Rowling, and that was British.
Yeah.
All British, all the time. That's what that is.
Yep.
Because that also fed into the movies. That was when she sold the rights, or whatever, however it worked, she said it had to be British actors. That's why they're all British.
Really?
Yes, she did not. And certainly the leads, the kids for sure had to be British.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think she, on the teachers and stuff, she probably wasn't that. But the kids, she said, have to be British. That was right there. And so they were. And so that's why they went on this big quest and found who they found. But the whole thing was, it was all, that was important to her, though.
And I did notice at the end of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Have you seen this?
I have not, but my daughters have.
Okay. So Eddie Redmayne plays a former Hogwarts student, now an adult, because this is a series about adults, but it's a prequel to the whole Harry Potter universe. So Colin Farrell is in it, playing, no spoilers, but, his character is American. But at the end of the film, I'm not going to ruin this for anybody, an actor who you've heard of, an American actor who you've heard of, shows up as a character that you never saw, but you heard of in the Harry Potter books, who is British. So they do finally have an American actor playing a British character in the Harry Potter universe, but only in this next series of films. I did not know that.
Yes.
But I did love the fact that, it seemed like almost every British actor that you might love was in this, with the exception of Ian McKellen and Judi Dench. I don't know why they never showed up in the Harry Potter movies.
Because, I know that Ian McKellen was doing Lord of the Rings.
Well, not at the the same time, but he kind of done Gandalf, so he just kind of thought, I'm not going to do another one of these because I played a big wizard.
Here's the thing about Lord of the Rings, British thing, but that was international.
That was multiculti, yeah.
Yeah. So, wait. Say that again.
Multiculti?
Hashtag.
Multicultural.
You got a hashtag.
Yes.
Hashtag
multiculti.
I
you
love
like
it.
that?
I love it a lot.
All right.
It took me off. Yeah. Okay. So those two, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, all the Merchant Ivory stuff.
I love those movies.
We love those. Of course we do. Because it's usually Emma Thompson.
Yeah. I tried to show A Room with a View to friends of mine, and they couldn't slow down enough to get it. I think A Room with a View.
Didn't you and I see that together?
Did we?
I want to say we did.
I've seen it a million times, so I'm sure if I had the opportunity to see it with you, I would. I'd do it right now if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It just didn't, they didn't get it. They didn't think it was funny. And I'm like, this movie is hilarious, but it's hilarious in a very deadpan British kind of under the radar kind of way.
When you asked, are they better? I say no, because it's different. Their, quote, entertainment or their definition of it is a little different from ours as far as, I know their comedy sense is very different. Yeah. There are movies that are so darn British and people think they're hysterical, and I just look at them and go, that's fine. I'm going to pass because it's so British in the way it is. I'm just not getting it. My American mind doesn't
sense of
get
humor.
It.
So one of the bands I was referring to when I was in high school, later on in high school, past Culture Club and Duran Duran and the Eurythmics and that whole thing, the Smiths were a big deal when I was in high school in my later years. And if you listened to the Smiths, as I did, they were so funny. So funny. I mean, they're a funny band. They're clever.
Okay.
And, but they had songs like Girlfriend in a Coma. Mm-hmm. And that didn't sound very funny.
No.
But if you listen to it, it's actually kind of, it's weird and it's dark, but they are kind of making fun of this perpetually depressed character that they're singing from the point of view from. And they're having fun with it.
Right.
Every Day is Like Sunday. It was that wasn't the Smiths, but Morrissey, who is the lead singer of the Smiths, released that as well. And basically, when he sings Every Day is Like Sunday, that would sound like a good thing, right? Except that his whole thing is every day is boring and gray and there's nothing to do.
Gotcha.
But he's kind of it's depressed and it's dour and it's dark, but in this very kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of way that's very British. I mean, it's
British.
just,
No, American writers don't do that. They just don't do that.
And The Room with a View, I think the period costumes might have put them off a little bit. The very, very formal speech. I mean, the conversations between...
You have to be in the mindset for the parlor kind of movies.
Yeah.
And, and that includes Jane Austen. I mean, seriously, how many times we're going to do Pride and Prejudice? How many versions of Pride and Prejudice do we need?
Well, I only need the one.
We're not done. We're not done. There are going to be more.
But I only need the one.
What are you talking about, Colin Firth?
Yeah, and Jennifer L. I mean, so beautiful. And
it's wonderful. But it's a mini-series
It's a mini-series, and that's why it's so good, because it does it justice, whereas a movie version of Pride and Prejudice never gets quite to the meat of,
the Laurence Olivier version and the Keira Knightley versions, they're good. And I appreciate them for what they are, and putting it into 2 hours. But it is, but Jane Austen, Emma, we just love that stuff. And of course, Shakespeare is the ultimate.
Well, sure.
Who doesn't like Shakespeare? And it's been done all sorts of ways, which is what
people think they don't like Shakespeare. But I don't believe people when they say they don't like Shakespeare.
I don't think they know.
It means they had to read it in high school and they didn't understand it. And so, if you've ever seen Shakespeare well acted,
correct.
It's very entertaining. I would say you start with Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson in Much Ado About Nothing.
Yes, I agree.
Because it's a light story. Yep. It's not,
And there are parts of it that I don't particularly care for the directing of. That was choices that he made. This, the Michael Keaton part, just FYI.
Yeah.
But, yes, it is wonderful. And I will tell you this. The slow motion scene where Denzel and his peeps are riding their horses in their big white puffy shirts toward the camera at sunset is worth the price of admission. I was watching, when I saw it in the theater, and pretty much I was there with a bunch of women over 30. And that scene came on, and literally I heard this. And it was in stereo because it was every single woman in there. Because they are riding on horseback toward us, sunset behind them, big puffy white shirts, and Denzel's in some black leather pants. It was fine filmmaking, Kenneth Branagh.
Well, and I remember the women rushing down to meet them with these very kind of blousy white. It was very Tuscany.
It's Italian.
Tuscany. They really went for that whole kind of, and everyone's freckled. Yep. And they've been all getting a lot of sun.
But that's a good one because it shows you the problem with Shakespeare is people, I don't think that they're going to understand what he's saying. Yeah. But if you've seen it and it's been boring or you didn't get it, it's because it wasn't directed well or the actors didn't know what they were saying.
Yes.
And this movie, Much Ado About Nothing, which I agree with you, is a great first Shakespeare movie to see. You understand that the actors know what they're saying. So that even if the words you're like, I'm not sure if I understand, you will know because the actor is acting it as well. So it's just, it's lovely. But again, we like that. And we don't have a Shakespeare here. I mean, we don't, we aren't old enough to have a Shakespeare here. So we like it. And so we pull it. And so then we steal it a lot of times.
And certain things have been kind of built off of Shakespearean plots.
Well,
and
we've
done...
Wait, is that right?
Clueless was Jane Austen.
But it's British. That's British. Yeah. But yes, we have taken things, 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yes.
That was Shakespeare.
Taming of the Shrew.
Correct. So we take things and we turn them around.
And I want to think there's a mob movie or something that was based off of Macbeth or King Lear or something along those lines.
Was it? It wasn't was it Scarface?
No, that was a true story.
That was
something like that. But we've done that with the tragedies as well, because that's the thing about Shakespeare
West
is that
Side
it's
Story.
all
Romeo and
Juliet.
Yep.
Total ripoff. And homage. We should say rather than ripoff. I mean, it really is an inspired kind of a thing. But and then there's British TV, which is interesting because British TV a lot of times looks cheaper than American TV. The production values aren't quite there. And yet, as time goes by, with one of my favorites, Judi Dench, is she's just as good in that as she is in anything that she's ever nominated for an Oscar for.
Yeah.
And she's charming and lovely, and the sets look like TV sets. I mean, they don't look. It doesn't look like a house. It looks like a set.
It's a set that was used by some other show, and they came in. It's like they did the soap operas during the day, and then they came in and did this series in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, no, they put their money in a different place than American productions do.
Yep. And maybe it's teaching people how to act
or write.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah. But I agree. But I think that when we think about TV, we don't realize how much American TV has stolen. We think it's our original stuff. But there's a lot over the years. There's a lot that were shows over in England.
Yep.
And then we stole them and we made them our own. For instance, Sanford and Son. Remember Red Fox? You ever see that?
Yeah.
it seems like that such American. You know, he owned this junkyard.
Yep.
And how he dealt with his son and everything was very, very United Statesian. But it actually, there was a version.
United Statesian?
No, hashtag America. But it came from, they had one like it. I forget what it was called, but it was British first, and then we stole it and created it. Yep. Another one, All in the Family. I mean, Archie Bunker.
That wasn't an American creation?
No, he adapted it from a British version.
And was it still that same liberal conservative kind of divide between the kids?
He was still an ass, yes.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea.
I know. Cash Cab, Trading Spaces, House of Cards.
I knew about that one.
Yeah. House of Cards I knew because I saw the original when it came out on PBS. Three's Company.
Was that a British show?
That was British before it was over here. And if you think about it, it feels like a British sex farce.
Yeah, you're right. It does.
And so I get that one really easily. American Idol, I think everybody knew that was something different. Shameless.
Yep.
Which is, I think that's Showtime. And The Office, obviously. Everybody knew it was the British version versus the American. But
which they changed. If they had done the British version in America, it would not have worked.
Have you seen, I watched the first episode of the British version compared to the first episode of the American version. They're almost word for word.
Are they really?
It is the most hysterical thing. They are almost word for word.
But what's interesting is, over time, Steve Carell's character in the American version of The Office, the main feature of that character is that he's incompetent. The main feature of Ricky Gervais's character is he's evil. Like, he's just an asshole.
Yeah.
You know, and Michael in the Steve Carell's version of that character was not an asshole.
A lovable idiot.
He was stupid, and he's incompetent, and he can drive you crazy from that angle, but he doesn't have ill intentions,
and I think
which Americans wouldn't be able to handle.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think you're exactly right. You don't see that he's evil in the first episode. Literally, it's very close to word for word.
That's interesting.
But I think that would not. No, I agree. That would not have flown. American audiences would say, "No, we hate him. We're out."
Yeah.
And that would be the end of that. He can be an idiot. He can be stupid, but he's got to be lovable.
Yeah, there is something in American pop culture that I've always noticed, that when people say so-and-so is not likable, I don't like that character, it means that I don't want to watch the show. And maybe it's because I spent a little bit of time in the UK growing up. Maybe it's just that I'm kind of an Anglophile and I've always appreciated that work. But I've always just kind of thought, you don't have to take them home with you. But if they're interesting and they're funny, because one good example of this for me, is Absolutely Fabulous. Those two women are not likable. I don't want to be friends with Patsy and Adina.
People.
They're horrible, awful people. They're funny as hell.
Yes, they are.
And so you can pity them, if anything, but even not really, because they don't deserve much of your pity. They're so shallow. They're not evil, but they're awful people that you don't like.
Correct.
You don't like them. They're shallow. And they're shallow on purpose.
And that we can do, but we can do that. It's if they were of evil intent and causing harm. That's where Americans, I think, would draw the line.
Adina's a terrible mother. I mean, the things she says to her daughter.
Is fine.
Yeah,
I'm not saying she has a great child. I'm saying that Saffron. We were Saffron. We were who she was.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Watching this thing.
We were sitting here rolling our eyes. She did the reactions that we were doing.
Yeah.
And we felt sorry for her. But
you're right. She was
Adina was not ever trying to hurt her.
No.
She was just selfish, horrible narcissist.
Selfish.
Extremely.
You know, yeah. So, I mean, these are adults who could have put their values in a different order and at some level chose not to.
Right. And that is an example of a series that just kind of came over here. We didn't steal it. We just we didn't change it. We didn't create our own.
We just put it on Comedy Central.
We just accepted it. And that was the same with Hell's Kitchen and Weakest Link. We had the same hosts of that. And so it was really very much the same personality. Now, there are some examples of TV shows that we tried to Americanize, but because of the Britishness of them, it didn't translate.
Like what?
One of them was Coupling. Did you ever see the British TV show Coupling?
No, but I remember, I never watched either the British or the American, but I remember the American version being a huge flop.
It was awful. Now, one thing is, I talked to you about The Office that was like word for word, both the American and the Brit for certainly the first pilot episode. That was the same thing with Coupling. Problem is, when you do it in that particular instance, Coupling was about people basically trying to hook up.
Okay.
Okay? So it was a bunch of singles. And two of them actually pair up. It was like Friends. It was 3 guys and 3 girls.
Okay.
And 2 of them actually hook up and they're a couple. And it's how, the lives go on. But the other 4 are just kind of, dating like that.
Each other or
not each
Okay.
other. Usually other people. And it's a very sexualized series. And they talk about sex all the time.
Okay.
As opposed to Friends that talked about other things.
Sure.
So I don't compare it to Friends.
So maybe they should have put it on HBO and it would have been better?
It might have, but at the same time, they didn't change much of the wording, literally.
Uh-huh.
And it just didn't. American, as we learned in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, with Andy McDowell, who's American, doing playing a character that was written for a British, it doesn't sound right. It just doesn't sound right when an American says those words with an American accent that are supposed to be said by a British person. So coupling was awful.
Okay.
Even though the British version was good. Cracker, which...
Never even heard of that.
That was a detective show that I saw. It was like in the 70s or 80s.
Okay.
Who is it played, what is his name? Hagar? What's the big guy in Harry Potter?
Oh, Rubus Hagrid.
Him.
Robbie Coltrane.
Robbie Coltrane. Okay. He was the star in the British version.
Okay.
Wonderful. Flawed psychologist who helps the cops solve mysteries. That's who he is.
That sounds like a great show.
It was a great show. And if you see it on rerun, watch it. They Americanized it with the guy who played the janitor in Murphy Brown. Not the janitor. Played the painter in Murphy Brown, the
Got
TV
it.
show.
Yep, remember him.
He was the American version. It didn't fly. It didn't work because America wasn't ready, in my opinion, for that flawed a hero.
Okay.
The Brits have always had flawed heroes.
We have
That's
to
what
like
I'm saying
them.
to you.
And we have to want to be their friends.
Now,
and I never got that.
Here are 2 that I watched the British version. I didn't know that we had tried to steal. One is The Vicar of Dibley, which is very British.
It sounds British.
How do you? Well, because she's a vicar. It's I can't remember her name now. Can't think of her name.
Oh, that helps.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Anyway, but The Vicar of Dibley, which is about this. It's a small village in England, and it's this vicar, and it's their first time they've gotten a female vicar.
Okay.
And so it's how the little town, does things. It's a situation comedy, and it's delightful.
Okay.
You'll see it on PBS and reruns. Watch it. It's hysterical. I can't even imagine how they would bring that to America. A vicar? The hell? We don't have villages. Okay.
Well,
so
they might have changed the construct a little bit.
Okay, but I know why it didn't work.
Okay.
I know. I can just tell you right now it
All
didn't work. Another one is Gogglebox. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
This is hysterical. I didn't hear about it. A friend of mine who lives in Ireland, shout out Judy, told me about Gogglebox, and we found it on YouTube or somewhere on the internet. It wasn't on TV here in America. And basically, it's a TV show about people in their own homes watching TV shows. So
you're gonna have to set this up for me because I'm not picturing this.
So you and I, we turn on our TV to watch Gogglebox. Okay? We turn on the TV and we see there are like 4 or 5 different families. They're real life families, and they have allowed cameras to be in their house.
Okay.
While they are watching a TV show.
Okay.
That we've seen probably because it's a national TV. It was on BBC One yesterday or whatever.
Gotcha.
And we are watching their reactions as they talk about the show they're watching. It's hysterical. I know.
It?
It is in England. Now, apparently, I don't know what they tried here in America because I don't even remember
that doesn't
them
sound
trying.
entertaining. It's probably because I'm an American and I'm picturing what it would be like to watch an American family watch TV, and it would be boring.
Correct, but it's not. They're funny. These families, it's like we sit around in MST3K kind of thing. They sit there and they say, I don't know why she's wearing that shirt, that short skirt. That's weird. And you're sitting there watching them watch. It's hysterical.
Okay.
So anyway, that didn't work in America. And as you said, as to one reason why, is the premise sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, it feels stupid, but
it was,
I trust you
it
if
did
you say
work,
it's funny.
No, and look it up. But as I said, why we love the UK stuff and why we steal stuff from them, I think that there is something to be said for having survived so long. You get credibility. England, the UK has credibility.
Yeah.
At one point, they ruled the world. They don't now, but they have. They still have a queen, it's like they're going to be there. You feel like they're going to be there forever. They're not an experiment.
Which we
and they've
don't.
got-
I don't think Americans feel like they're living in an experiment day to day. But when you look at it from a historical perspective, there's probably something to
We're
that.
babies.
Yeah.
In a historical, especially compared to the UK, they've been aware, 1066.
Yep.
So, and they've got nothing to prove. They just kind of do what they do. They have their own sense of humor. They don't care whether Americans follow them or not. They don't care.
Yeah, and as we've said a number of times, British actors don't have the vanity that that a lot of American actors feels like they have. They're not going to make a choice of whether or not to do something as to whether it'll impact how they're seen or whether this is a good role for their career. They just want to work.
It's a job.
They'll just work.
I like to act, so if you will pay me to act, I will do your thing, said Michael Caine to literally everything that ever was given to him. I swear to God.
He was in a Steven Seagal movie at one point.
Dude, he's been in everything. He was in Blame It on Rio.
Oh.
Look that up and enjoy. Oh, my gosh.
Okay, so when we come back, we're going to get into a bigger conversation about...
Brits.
Hold on, because we've talked about most of this stuff.
So what do we talk about? Well, no, we can go a little bit more in depth.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna pause it.
We will return to Popperation in just a moment. Please stand by.
And we're back.
So we're talking about British actors and the differences between British actors and American actors.
Yeah. So one of the things that I keep bringing up this question, and we keep on saying no about are British actors better? Not necessarily. But one of the things that you said the other day...
No, that's not what you asked. The first question you asked was not, are British actors better? Is British...
entertainment better?
Yes, and that's a different question.
It's a different question. And I would say, are British actors better? Of course, there are amazing American actors.
Yes.
There are amazing American actors.
Okay, but I'm still going to say yes.
Well, okay, and we can talk about that. But one thing where I will agree with you on absolutely are British child actors better.
Yes. OMG.
Oh, my God. I mean,
here's what I want to say to you.
How does that...
Here's what I'm going to say. So the other day, we're flipping channels, and then we just got stuck. I don't know, maybe we lost the remote for a few minutes, and so we're stuck on the Disney Channel. Mm-hmm. And they had one of their new random-ass shows. I don't even know, okay? My girls are too old for it, so we haven't been watching Disney lately.
Okay.
So we're watching this with new eyes, me and my teenage daughters.
Yep.
It was awful. And it wasn't just the plot was stupid, because you expect this plot to be stupid.
Sure.
It's Disney for kids, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But the acting of these children, and you sit there and you think there are hundreds of thousands of children who go to Hollywood or New York to try to be actors, to make it on TV or in film, that are auditioning, they're taking classes. And this is the best you got? It was awful. They were horrible. There was no sense of timing. They didn't know it was like they didn't know what they were saying. So these lines that weren't great, but they could have gotten a chuckle or at least a smirk, got nothing because the children can't deliver them. And you're like, I know the director is doing all they can, but this is awful. It's an awful show with awful actors. And my children and I talk to each other, and I'm like, you could pull a kid off of any London street. I'm talking about your little homeless child. Put him in front of a camera, and he would have been brilliant. And I would put money.
Is that true? I don't know.
Yes, it is. I will broke no argument here. It is.
Well, I wonder if
true.
Maybe there's something to do with, because they did that with the Harry Potter kids, right? I mean, they had auditions for what seemed like years to get the right. I think sometimes they cast better. I think they don't necessarily put up with kids who can't act in the UK. They just say no. We're just not going to. They just don't put them on TV.
But even if you see somebody who's asked, a man on the street interview, kids, not kid actors, kids in England, it really is like they come across less self-conscious.
Maybe.
And then they have their little accents, which are adorable.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say is maybe to an American ear, Like, it just sounds a little bit more credible because they've already got the accent down. And to us, that sounds like an achievement. Whereas to a kid, they just speak with the accent they were raised with.
I just like to think I have a little bit more. I think I'm a little bit more critical than that. But
really maybe it's a combination of all of those things. I think they cast better in the UK. I don't think they deal with people who can act. And so you wouldn't have found.
You grab a kid off the street, you could make him a star.
Okay.
But
maybe.
not in America.
Yeah.
In America, no, you can't. And
I have seen some awful child actors in Hollywood, American kids who cannot act their way through.
I'm telling you, we watched
wet toilet paper
and 3 different Disney shows because, again, we had lost the remote. And they were all horrible.
So, okay. But now let's go to the adults.
Yeah.
So we're going to say, are British actors better? And you're going to say yes.
I am going to say yes.
Okay.
I think it's a way. I think there's an attitude. I think there's a training. I think, as I said something about, that most British actors, in my opinion, are workhorse.
I think
they will do anything. James Mason back in the day, Ray Milland back in the day. Then you come up to Michael Caine. Judi Dench has done some weird stuff.
Yeah.
British actors will do anything if you pay them money. They are whores in that sense. And I don't mean it and that is not an insult. I am saying that in that I think that it's a really good work ethic. We are working. There's that story, that anecdote about Marathon Man, and it was Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin is getting ready for a scene, and he
stayed up all night, and he's been starving himself.
But he's sitting there, and he's really trying to get into the moment.
Giving himself
he's
sleep
doing the
deprivation stuff.
Whatever, but
all
he's
this
sitting
crazy
there.
method shit he was doing.
And Laurence Olivier, at one point, they're just waiting for Dustin to get into the moment so they can start filming, and he just says, "Can you just act?" And
I've always heard the story, my darling boy, it's so much easier if you just act. I
think here's the thing is, my feeling is there's both of those are probably wrong, just because I think that it's been,
sure. This is an urban legend, but
yeah, it's an urban legend, but something like that did happen. But the idea that what I pull from it is the whole idea that Laurence Olivier was just act. You don't have to go through all of this to do a good job. Yeah. And I think that that's the feeling. Brits are like, it's acting. It's not my life. It's my job. So I get paid for it and I do the best of my ability. And usually they happen to be really, really good.
Yeah.
But they don't care.
And this idea that you have to torture yourself to play these kinds of roles. And I never hear British actors being praised as doing something, oh, that's so brave. That's so brave of you to do. They're like, they do their job. I wonder if there's anything to this. This is maybe totally a story I'm making up. I wonder if British actors generally do a lot more theater. I think there's a certain amount of discipline that comes in the theater. If you've done theater before, you've had to do the same performance night after night after night and make it real and fresh on the 32nd thousandth take. And you gain a kind of discipline where you just show up and do the work. And it doesn't matter if you don't feel like you're in the mood or you're not up on your feelings enough to do this take. You just do it because that's what theater actors have to do.
But what I think there is some training. I think there is a classical training that they go through. And I think there's a lot more of theater that has gone through before they hit the screen, whether it's the small or the big. Whereas here, you can go from nothing to being on the Mickey Mouse show immediately. You know what I mean? Yep. And so suddenly you're on TV, but you have no training whatsoever.
Well, and who's done a whole lot of theater in the past 5 or 6 years? Harry Potter himself. Daniel Radcliffe has done a Broadway musical, a Broadway play. Oh, yeah. The last time I was in London, he was doing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead with some guy his age I'd never even heard of. But he's just doing the work, And
but that's what, and as I said, there's a different work ethic. It's not about what's going to make me come across as a certain type of person or what's going to
make me famous
or what's going to make me be taken seriously as an actor. We've known of movie stars who got, movie stardom because they had these huge big hits. And then suddenly they made these movies that were just not hits because people didn't want to see them in that. But these are choices they'd made because they wanted to be taken seriously as an actor. Brits don't care whether you take them seriously or not, which is why Michael Caine was in Blame It on Rio. He doesn't care. That's why he was in Cars. He did the voiceover for Cars. I mean, they don't care. But that's what makes it fun, too, because you never know when they're going to show up in something.
Although I think I did recall Michael Caine saying something after he won his Oscar for The Cider House Rules, where he said, and this wasn't about making choices in the way that you're talking about, but he did say something like, it just dawns on me that now maybe I don't have to take everything they offer me.
Well, and I think that's another thing.
He was just talking about slowing down.
Yes.
Like, he's getting older. He doesn't need to do but he still wasn't going to evaluate it in the same way that an American actor who just won an Oscar might now evaluate all of their choices because now I'm being taken seriously and blah, blah, blah.
I agree. I also, we talk about actors. There are also the whole idea that there are British actors who are, they're taking our jobs away, Eric. They come over here and they take our jobs.
Well, but they speak English, so they're allowed in.
But they do these American accents. They're acting like they're Americans.
Well, and there's a little bit of that on both sides. But probably more British actors playing Americans than because we don't know. Half the time, you'll see an actor that you've really enjoyed in a number of things, and they'll be speaking in their own voice, and you'll be like, holy crap, they're British,
exactly. No, it's true.
And you just have no idea. Yeah. The first time that happened to me was the guy who's now in The Americans. This was when he was in Brothers and Sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Rhys. Yeah. First time I heard him speak outside of these American television shows he was in. Well, actually, in The Americans, he plays a Russian, but a Russian playing an American.
Right, with an American accent.
With an American accent. And I was just floored. Wow. I had no idea.
I knew he was British, but I hadn't seen him in anything. It was one of those where he was it was when they were doing the promos for The Americans, and I'm like, I don't think he's American. And then I saw him in PBS, had Masterpiece Theater, had a Murder at Pemberley, which is kind of a sequel to
Pride and Prejudice,
but not really. But it's kind of a fun murder mystery kind of thing, and he played Darcy, and of course he's very British because it's British, and I went, okay, now you look right. He didn't look right speaking with an American accent. That's what got me on him. He just looked funny. Now, others don't look funny when they do American. Hugh Laurie doesn't look funny when he does American.
He does, although I knew that he was British before he did House.
Yes, so did I. But he does it very naturally. He did House, and he's very, very natural, as is Damian Lewis. I did not know. Now, I saw him first. It was a TV show he was the star of called Life. Wonderful. It lasted maybe one season, but it was brilliant. It should have lasted forever. It was wonderful. He played a cop who had been incarcerated. Anyway,
I remember that. I didn't see it, but I remember it being out.
And then he'd been set up, and so he got let off. He sued the state, and he got all this money. So he was really, really rich when he got out of jail, and he wanted to still be a cop. And so there was a lot of stuff there because there was also who set him up kind of thing. So it was a mystery. It's a great show. If you see it, I think it's on Netflix.
And he played American in that.
He played an American, and that's where I first saw him. Didn't know he was British, had no idea. Yep. And then suddenly he was on, it was something Masterpiece Theater, and there he is, and he's got all Britishy. Mm-hmm. And of course, then he did Homeland.
Yeah,
and everybody knows that he was very American in that, and he's doing something. He's doing something now about
Billions.
Yeah, Billions.
Is that his thing? Yeah,
yeah, and he's American in that as well. So he's good as well. Millie Bobby Brown. Do you watch Stranger Things?
I do, and I didn't know she was British, and she's a little kid who does an American accent brilliantly.
Well, and does she have a Southern accent?
I don't recall. I mean, she's a little otherworldly in the sense that her character has been so there's this kind of thing in the Stranger Things that's like this alternate dimension that's happening at the same time as our stuff is going on, and she's been trapped kind of in this other dimension for a long time. Her name is 11 because she's kind of a subject and no one knows what her real name is or where she comes from. But it never occurred to me that she was British. It's a very it feels like a very Steven Spielberg / Stephen King 80s throwback, and the whole thing is produced that way. And so these little boys who were in it are just like the 12-year-old boys who would be the lead of any 80s slightly scary thing, and she's a part of this cast, and she's terrific.
I know that way back in the day, in the 30s and the 40s, when Brits would come over, a lot of times they would play Southerners. For example, Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, because there's the Southern accent and the British accent a lot of commonality.
The high-born Southern accent, yes.
Correct.
They wouldn't play Hicks.
Correct. Although it's still a little easier, but you're right, the hard R's, whatever. I won't get into that. That would be boring. So, point being that now they're able to do more of the American standard.
Stacey, do.
I couldn't if I tried. I don't even know where that came from. So, suddenly I'm Lovey from Gilligan's Island. But now they're able to do these standard American... Sometimes I go places and I don't know how I get there.
Oh, and I'm doing this thing where, like, I'm doing my... I'm laughing so hard, I'm not even making any sound.
You're not making any noise at all.
Which is so great for podcasting. Okay, sorry, Frank,
again,
sorry.
It's okay. Everybody's fine. But the whole, so now everybody, they're aware that they're doing these accents that are wonderfully... Now, I agree, there are some who, where it goes the opposite way, where they're Americans who are doing British...
Yeah. So Meryl Streep finally won another Oscar after 20-odd nominations for playing Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady. Surrounded by Brits, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
I mean, she was the only American to speak of.
Oh, wait, am I thinking of
who wasn't playing an American.
You're right. Yep.
So there was that. We talked about the Jane Austen craze we went through a while back, and Gwyneth Paltrow played Emma.
Yep.
Her British accent was lovely.
It was.
I think Goop is full of shit, but I'll give Gwyneth this. She knows how to do a British accent.
Oh, yeah, no. She's a good actor.
Yeah.
That's
Goop
dead stop.
Yeah.
Dead stop. She's a good actor.
I'm very anti-Goop.
Dead stop.
I'm very anti-Goop.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But
there seems to be a lot of prestige when an American actor can play British. That's like, ooh, fancy.
Oh, you know who does it well, too? Robert Downey Jr.
Really?
Sherlock.
Oh, yeah.
He does it very nice.
His Sherlock Holmes was really good. I forgot about his.
I know.
There's so many Sherlocks. Okay, that's another thing.
There's another, yeah.
Sherlock Holmes, right? So one of these characters that we just can't seem to let go of, Robert Downey Jr., and his Watson was Jude Law.
Yes.
Elementary, this show where Johnny Lee Miller's Watson, interestingly, is Lucy Liu. Interesting and fascinating. They set it in New York, but they kept him being British.
Right.
And then the new one, which I love, is Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman.
Who doesn't? I'm a Cumberbitch.
Yeah, me too. Totally. Hashtag Cumberbitch.
Hashtag Cumberbitch. We just did a high five.
And that's the updated. Elementary's updated too.
And
but we can't let go of this character. He's so fascinating to us in a lot of ways.
It's such a British character.
Because again, if Sherlock Holmes is done well, you don't want to have a cup of coffee or tea, perhaps, with Sherlock Holmes.
Maybe
drive you up the wall,
unless you're taking the opium with him.
Maybe, but he's not pleasant. Sherlock Holmes is not a pleasant man.
He's got so many issues.
Yeah.
He is so flawed.
But fascinating to watch and does give him a little bit... You know why he's this super detective is because he's kind of a sociopath. He doesn't have a lot of feelings, and so none of those biases get in his way from seeing what absolutely is. Fascinating character. And the other British character that we can't seem to get enough of is James Bond.
Oh, yeah. But the public of the world keeps saying we want to... when one gets too old...
Who's going to be the next Bond?
Who's the next one?
Who's going to be the next Bond? And there have been... And it's been all the way through the uber sophisticated, and then it went to like Roger Moore, which was almost like, he would go through things and his white tuxedo would be just as sparkling at the end of this big adventure thing as after. And then it got to Daniel Craig, which got like gritty and dirty and, and he was almost a little darker.
Well, James Bond has evolved over the decades. As the decades changed, there was, during the first 3 or 4 of them, they were having sex with literally anything that was female. Literally.
Well, yeah.
Hit.
Raise your hand if you want to bone Sean Connery. Every hand in the room goes up because
not this one.
Sean.
No,
really?
I was sorry. I was Roger Moore. Stacey was Roger
Connery.
Moore.
Well, Roger Moore was. Roger Moore was probably had more charm, but Sean Connery's hot.
He was, but he's also a huge ass chauvinist. I just have issues. But anyway, yes.
Right.
Point being, and I get that's a big debate. The Connery versus Moore is a huge debate in Bond. But anyway,
But you know what? I'm Team Craig.
Well,
I am. I love
he's
Daniel Craig's
great.
work.
But here's what I want to say. I want to say that, so when Pierce Brosnan got it,
Yep.
they made a very specific, conscientious decision to make him less of a man whore.
Okay.
Because it was the 80s, 90s, and it was irresponsible. The AIDS epidemic was now out, and everybody was aware of it. And they were aware that it wasn't just for homosexuals. That and there needed to be safe sex, and you couldn't just be boning anything that was out there. And
Did he carry condoms with him? James Bond? Do we know?
but he only in Pierce's first two. I think he only had sex with one girl in each movie.
Okay.
And that's a huge difference from 5 in each movie.
Yeah.
Literally every single female that Connery and Moore met, they had sex with.
Yeah.
But that's, again, what James Bond, the reason he's
And then when Daniel Craig took over, he actually fell in love with a woman in his very first movie.
I will say this. You know that George Lazenby, he only did one James Bond. And his heroine was Diana Rigg.
Okay.
So she was like the best Bond girl ever. With the worst Bond ever. But they fell in love and they got married. And then she got killed. But that's so he had a history that he had fallen in love.
Okay.
But it didn't turn out well. So he tried not to do that anymore. But yeah, so when Daniel Craig did, but again, Bond, I think, has survived because they made it so that he would survive. They changed him. He evolved as the decades.
But something about
changed.
this British super spy that
he has
just
to be British. He can't be American.
Get enough
Has
of.
to be British.
Although there is this whole thing: should Idris Elba be the next James Bond?
I would be fine with that.
I'm so in line with that. I'm so there for that. Yeah, I am too. Of course, his race comes into it. It's like, well, why can't we just create a new character? And it's like, well, why do we need to? If we want to see another James Bond, why can't Idris Elba do it?
Well, which also goes to this other thing, which is on the TV side, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's a big controversy because the new Doctor Who is a woman. Oh, my gosh, so much controversy.
When it's been set up that the Time Lord can become a woman.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like
because the Master became a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense. But my point being, Doctor Who is he was gone for many, many years, like from the 80s. I think they stopped, and then they started again in the 2000s, and he evolved. He changed with the time. I'll be honest with you. You look at one of the first episodes, that first season of Doctor Who, I can't watch it. It's too British. I have no idea. Get out of here. And it is British. It's extremely British.
Yeah.
But now it's more of an international feel to me.
Yep.
And but yeah, I think that's the same with Bond.
Although Jodie Whittaker, I'm very excited about.
She'll be great.
I like her. Some of my friends were not all that thrilled with her because they knew her from Broadchurch, and her character in Broadchurch was the grieving mom whose son, whose young boy, was the victim in this murder mystery. The entire show is built around. Okay,
she was wonderful.
Somebody whose 12-year-old son was just killed. That person's going to be a downer at parties, okay? This is not a happy... So everyone's like, she was so annoying in that show. It's like, she was playing a grieving mother. She's a great actor.
She's
great. Really good.
She was great.
Yeah, so I think she's going to do what she needs to do for Doctor Who.
She's going to be Doctor Who.
And do I trust her more because she's British?
Yes,
maybe.
I really do.
Maybe I do.
Here's where some controversy would come in. If they had said, okay, now we're going to have an American Doctor Who.
Oh, I think the world would have.
I would have a problem.
Really?
I would have a problem with that. Yeah, Doctor Who needs to be British. That's just who Doctor Who is. And I feel the same way about James Bond. James Bond.
Yeah.
Now, James Bond is working for Her Majesty's Secret Service. So, but you could have somebody transplant in and be American. But I think that...
What about an American actor who could do the British accent really well? Who played British really well, as long as the character was British. If Robert Downey Jr. or somebody like that.
Yeah, somebody who it has to be a British character.
Okay. And do you feel the same way about Doctor Who?
Yes, I do. I think the character has to be British, not the actor.
Okay.
I agree. Yes, I will define it as that way.
So before we leave this whole thing about actors, one of the things on your list is like every villain ever seems to be a British person.
The best ones are.
I wonder. See, I've always wondered if it goes back to that study I talked about at the beginning of this show, where British people sound smarter. Mm-hmm. Because don't you want your villain to be smart?
Yes.
And typically, and we've argued about this in the past, I think oftentimes the villains are a little smarter than the heroes, which makes it, because you want your hero to be up against something that seems insurmountable. So when they do finally best them at the end, it seems like this big accomplishment.
Well,
so having a British villain really helps in that regard, because if you hear their voice and automatically assign them tons of intelligence, then it's just like, ooh, you don't have to say that this person's smart. You don't even have to show them being all that smart. We believe that they're super intelligent because, they're British.
Well, there's one really good example of this, what we're talking about, and that is Disney's Sleeping Beauty, the animated version.
Okay.
So the 3 fairies that help Aurora, who is the Sleeping Beauty, and of course she is cursed by Maleficent that before her 16th birthday, the princess will
prick her finger on a spinning wheel,
and she'll die, as you do back then. So the king sends her with Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather. And
Post Pavilion.
They it's a very local inside joke. They take her off to the forest and they raise her for 15 and a half years.
Away from spinning wheels,
because they've all been burned anyway. They are all American actresses with American accents, and they're kind of buffoony. Maleficent has a British accent.
What about Aurora?
Aurora is American.
Okay.
Now, Maleficent is extremely evil, and of course we know she turns into a dragon and all of that. I don't think I'm spoiling it for anybody. But her people who
Although, as Angelina Jolie will tell you, she had a side to that story.
Anyway. Yes, she did. Which is, I love that. But also, she had a British accent in that.
Yep,
Speaking of, Angelina Jolie does a nice British accent as well. Because she also, I believe, Lara Croft was also British, if I recall. Yes. So anyway, but the point being that made Maleficent even more threatening. Now, her little minions were idiots, and so that's how Disney got around that, because we've talked about Disney villains before. But I do think that adds a little bit more, and maybe it's because we think they're smarter, or they have more credibility, or cunning.
And they're sophisticated, and so they,
think about Lion King. Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons was the voice of the evil one. Whereas
Matthew Broderick was
James Earl Jones was, they were very American.
Yep.
So I think that we do tend to, we give them smarts, but we also will give them evil. I mean,
But I think those two go hand in hand a lot. When your movie villains obviously are evil, they're villains. But I think oftentimes they're British because they sound smarter. And that adds to the threat that a villain will provide you if they're not only evil, but they're also, you don't find a lot of evil idiots that are villains. No. And if you did, you probably wouldn't give them, you'd give them the kind of very Cockney, over the top kind of,
Yes, you do. Like thinking, I'm in the animation thing, 101 Dalmatians. Cruella's 2 sidekicks are working class
very
accents.
Cockney, very Cockney.
And so that's, I think, and they were buffoons.
And they're bumbling. Yeah. So there is something about that Cockney accent that does sound a little,
The posh is going to be the leader.
Uh-huh. And they're going to be smarter.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows how British classism trickles down even to America.
Exactly.
Because My Fair Lady is all about that, right? About how your station in life is predicted so often by the quality of your accent.
Yes.
And it's funny, though, because, you look at something like, I can't believe we haven't even talked about Downton Abbey in this whole thing. But, in Downton Abbey, I know a lot of Americans who watch that show who couldn't really tell the difference between the accents used by the downstairs staff.
Shut up.
To them, Carson and Mrs. Hughes sound just as posh
I don't know how to
as everyone, but they just sounded British. Everyone just sounded British. Now, I don't know if it's because I lived in the UK for 2 years. It's because I watch a lot of British entertainment, so I just, something about it. Like, I heard Mrs. Hughes, and I'm like, oh, she's Scottish. And everyone's like, how do you know? Did they say she was Scottish? I'm like, listen to her.
She has an accent.
She's Scottish. They couldn't place the Scottishness of her accent.
Okay.
And, and Mr. Carson doesn't have a Cockney,
nobody's working class,
but it's a little bit more, a little posher, because he is a butler who interfaces with a lot of but it still has that level. It doesn't sound like Lady Mary,
right?
And doesn't sound like the Dowager Countess.
It's not the upper,
no, it's not the people who live upstairs. And I heard a distinct difference between all those accents, and not all Americans who watched that show necessarily did.
Well, now that begs the question: if British people are watching American, do they distinguish between a Southern accent or a Bronx accent with the American standardized accent.
I'm sure they can hear the subtle differences, just like we can hear a difference between someone who's, the extremes. Like if you've got a really extreme, like Cruella de Vil's henchman, bumbling, and it's like the whole Pinky and the Brain thing, and you hear Pinky, and that whole, all those crazy sounds. Hi, Brian. That doesn't sound as posh as the Brain's accent, which, it's so.
He's Orson Welles. He was doing Orson Welles. Yeah. He doesn't have he's American. That's an American accent.
But there's something about that very kind of Cockney voice. We can tell the difference between that. But you're right. I mean, the subtle differences between, slightly New York versus kind of LA, upspeak Valley Girl kind of a thing versus somebody from Texas who's got a light kind of, who knows?
See, now I will say this. because I'm from the South, I can usually distinguish between the different Southern accents.
And all the states have their own.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the Texas is different from the Tennessee, which is different from the Georgia, which is really different from the Alabama and Mississippi. I mean, and North Carolina, and the Carolinas have their own thing going on. So yes, but I grew up there. So that's one reason. Some of it is where you're growing up and what your experience is. And to me, when I listen
to a Southern accent, it either sounds posh or not.
Right.
And that's really the only difference I can take of that. So when it comes to the British accents, again, I can tell the difference between Lady Mary and Mrs. Hughes, but not everyone could, and it's just but class is such a huge
But I do.
issue.
I think that's one reason why we like them, because they do it. Maybe that's one reason. Maybe it is because it's so obvious. Like it's very, we can peg them. We do like to peg things. We like to put them in a box, and we're able to do that fairly easily. And if it's a guy in a dark suit with a British accent, we're like, that's our villain.
Yep.
Got it. Done.
Yeah.
Check that off.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So maybe that's I don't know.
And also I think this thing, if you're interested in class and how that has an impact on life, so many British things also just take that on as a topic area. My favorite is Howard's End, which is this whole allegory, really quick plot outline of Howard's End. These two sisters who are middle class befriend this woman from the upper classes, and when she dies fairly early on in the film, she leaves the house to these two middle-class sisters. Well, her family will not have it, so they destroy the only copy of this will and they keep the house. But then her husband, her surviving husband, feels guilty and decides what he should probably do is marry one of these sisters. And so he does, and so this woman ends up moving into the house anyway. And her sister, so Emma Thompson is the one who marries Anthony Hopkins, her younger sister, Helena Bonham Carter, becomes pregnant from a man of the lower classes. And so she ends up kind of becoming a part of this family, and there's a whole scandal. Should we let her in? She's a single unwed mother. This is all awful. And at the very end of the film, they divorce, Emma Thompson and Anthony Hopkins. The two sisters are living in the house, and the one who's going to eventually take it over is this bastard son or daughter of the middle class and the lower classes. And it's really just this allegory. This house kind of stands in for England, like who's going to run things, right? And it's about the diminishing influence of these upper classes. It's all about class.
Right.
But it's also a very human story. I mean, as they go through all of these chapters, you really do kind of follow, and the performances are amazing. Emma Thompson won her first Oscar for
Speaking
this.
of Brits
Helena
we
Bonham
love,
Carter.
Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson are two of my faves.
And the woman who dies at the beginning, Vanessa Redgrave.
And he does a really good American accent. Remember him?
Yeah. So recently, Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter,
That's what I was thinking of.
Fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet it even sounded British because he was so freaking scary. And we maybe villains British, that just, that all kind of goes together for us. And so, yeah. Anyway, we've covered a lot of ground.
I don't even know what this show is about.
Celebration.
I have no idea.
It's all about the
we
UK.
Heart Brits.
We do.
We do. We really do. But I think that we, it's good to be aware of where some of this, like, as you said, some of these shows, some of these TV shows and these movies, you don't realize the influence that country, that the UK has still on these United States. And I think that it's kind of fun. But I think there's a connection between the two cultures, and I think there always will be. And one reason is because we always want to be. But it's that English speaking thing is a huge connector.
Yeah.
Is that we understand them, and their accent isn't so over. Like the French, we don't always understand them. You know, the Italians, we don't always understand them unless, you know, your ancestors came from there. But
there are other English-speaking cultures. I mean, but we don't watch Israeli movies or Indian movies or even Australian movies with the same level. I mean, I am an Anglophile. It's just,
and there's a show that it's a series. Well, there's a couple of series mysteries. So I get Acorn, which is a subscription. UK.
It's the Hulu for British TV.
It is the Hulu for British TV, exactly. And of course, I get that. And there's some Australian and New Zealand shows that I watch, but it's really interesting. You're exactly right. Those characters, and they're not necessarily always blue collar characters or anything like that, but because it's an Australian accent, I am putting it in a different category in my little brain than I am if it were Maggie Smith or Anthony Hopkins saying it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we give that British accent a gravitas that even other parts of the UK we don't.
Yeah, but it's not, and it's the accent and it's the sensibility. Yeah. It's the reason that I could listen to Girlfriend in a Coma by the Smiths and realize that this is really funny. And not all Americans necessarily got that it was funny. Like, why are you listening to that depressing music? Are you okay?
Right.
And I'm like, I'm great. This is hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the things where, you know, certain British comedies just don't play when you try to put them in an American context.
You can't Americanize them.
Not always.
You got to leave them
because there's a sensibility about what the British bring. There was a movie that I can't find anywhere called Getting It Right. But it was, and Helena Bonham Carter, one of her early things, and Jane Horrocks, also from Absolutely Fabulous, was in this, and it's about a young man. Lynn Redgrave was in this movie, and you know, there's just something about the people didn't think they were funny. No one in the movie laughed at each other as they said these things, and you just were falling all over yourself, laughing so hard at some of these things, which I can't really repeat on TV because they were rude.
You're not on TV.
I'm not on TV. Don't want to. I know we have an E rating, but I don't even want to say some of the things that were going on. But anyway, there's a sensibility there. Yep. In addition to just, you know,
I agree.
We find British accents unattractive, said no one ever. And then there's also this cultural thing that I think that we're just kind of in love with. And and maybe we don't need to explain it all the time.
No, maybe it's just it's aspirational and we enjoy it. And they make us laugh and they make us cry and we like it.
Hashtag Marca.
Hashtag Marca.
Okay, well, this is Popperation. I am Eric.
I'm Stacey.
And you can find us at popperationroom.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Find us at Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Yep. And we will be back next week. See you then.
You've been listening to Popperation with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at popperationroom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to Popperation via iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow at Popperation Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by purpleplanet.com.